In 1950, Rhyl on the North Wales coast was one of the most visited holiday destinations in Britain. The beaches were packed, the funfair was full, the hotels were booked months in advance. Families from the Midlands and Northwest England came every summer by train, by charabanc, by car, and stayed for a week in guest houses that stretched back from the promenade in every direction. The town existed for one purpose, and it was very good at that purpose. By 2010, Rhyl had some of the highest rates of child poverty in Wales. The funfair was partially demolished. The hotels were mostly closed or converted to bedsits for welfare claimants. The main shopping street had one of the highest vacancy rates of any high street in Britain. The transformation of Rhyl from one of Britain's most popular holiday destinations to one of its most deprived communities did not happen by accident. It happened through a combination of decisions, most of them made in Westminster and Cardiff rather than in Rhyl, that no one in Rhyl was consulted about, and that no one in government has ever been required to account for. In this video, we are counting down 12 British seaside towns that were abandoned by their own government. Not towns that declined because of natural economic forces. Towns where the decisions that caused the decline were made by people who did not live there, who did not consult the people who did, and who have never been held accountable for the consequences. Stay with me to the end, because number 1 is a town that was specifically promised government investment. Watch that investment go to another town 30 miles away and has been waiting for an explanation ever since. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's begin. Weston-super-Mare on the Somerset coast was, for much of the 20th century, the dominant seaside resort of the southwest of England. The pier, the Grand Pier, rebuilt after a fire in 2008, the donkeys on the beach, the Banksy Dismaland installation in 2015, the specific quality of the Bristol Channel Light, all form part of a town that has both a strong cultural identity and a documented economic problem. Weston's specific difficulty is its relationship with Bristol. It is close enough to Bristol that it functions partly as a day trip destination rather than a holiday destination, which means visitors come and spend money on a day trip basis without staying in the hotels or the guest houses that provided the town's economic backbone when it was a proper holiday destination. The hotels that remain have faced sustained pressure from the shift toward day trip economics. The town has a significant population living in areas classified among the most deprived 20% in England. The specific policy decisions about the Southwest Regional Development Agency, the tourist infrastructure investment that went to destinations further from Bristol, and the question of what level of government support was and was not provided to Weston-super-Mare across the period of its economic transition from holiday destination to day trip resort, have not been the subject of a formal independent assessment. The pier was rebuilt, Banksy came, the day trippers come from Bristol, the town that was a proper holiday destination has become something different, and the people who live there year-round have absorbed the consequences of that transition without being consulted about it. Clacton-on-Sea on the Essex coast has the distinction of being the first town in post-war Britain to elect a UKIP MP to Westminster. The 2014 Clacton by-election, in which Douglas Carswell won for UKIP following his defection from the Conservative Party, was widely read as a political signal about the specific discontent of seaside communities that felt left behind by mainstream political parties. The political signal was correct. Clacton is one of the most deprived seaside communities in England. It has among the highest rates of unemployment, welfare dependency, and health problems of any coastal town. Its population is old relative to the national average. Younger people leave, older people remain. The town exists in the specific economic limbo of a British seaside resort that was built for a domestic holiday market that no longer exists, and that has not found a replacement economic purpose. The formal regeneration investment that successive governments have announced for Clacton has not produced the transformation that the announcements promised. The levelling up funding that was allocated to the wider tendering district in which Clacton sits was a portion of what comparable communities received. The political signal that Clacton sent in 2014 was heard by political parties in the specific terms of how to capture the vote, rather than in the structural terms of what the vote was actually expressing. The structural question, what does a seaside town do when its purpose has disappeared, and no one in government is required to answer the question with the specificity it requires, has not been answered. Morecambe on the Lancashire coast is famous for three things: Eric Morecambe, the comedian who took the town's name as his stage name, the spectacular sunsets over Morecambe Bay, and the 2004 Morecambe Bay cockling disaster, in which 23 Chinese cockle pickers died in the incoming tide on the bay's sands. The cockling disaster is relevant to this video, not as a natural disaster, but as an economic indicator. The people who were cockle picking in Morecambe Bay on that February night in 2004 were there because cockle picking in the bay offered economic activity that had been organized by gangmasters exploiting workers who had no other economic options in a part of England where formal employment was scarce. The formal employment was scarce because Morecambe's economic base had collapsed. The town had been one of the most popular holiday destinations in the north of England in the interwar period, when it was known as the Bradford Seaside. The workers from the West Yorkshire mills and factories came on the train, the town's hotels filled, and the winter gardens and the promenade provided the entertainment. When cheap package holidays made Majorca cheaper than Morecambe, the Bradford workers went south. The train services that had connected the town to its catchment area were reduced. The hotels closed. The winter gardens, a magnificent Victorian entertainment complex, fell into dereliction and was eventually demolished, despite sustained campaigning to save it. The regeneration of Morecambe has been announced multiple times by multiple governments. The announcement of the Eden Project North in Morecambe, a major visitor attraction that would have transformed the town's visitor economy, was made and has been delayed repeatedly. The people of Morecambe wait. Skegness on the Lincolnshire coast is one of the most recognisable British seaside resorts. The Jolly Fisherman poster, originally created in 1908, is one of the most famous British advertising images. The Billy Butlin holiday camp that opened nearby in 1936 was the first Butlins and established a holiday model that defined the post-war British holiday experience. For decades, Skegness was the destination for workers from the East Midlands industrial towns: Nottingham, Derby, Leicester, Sheffield. The East Midlands coalfield workers, the factory workers, the mining communities came to Skegness. When the coal industry was destroyed in the 1980s, the communities that had provided Skegness's economic base were themselves destroyed. The workers who no longer had jobs did not take holidays in Skegness. The town lost its catchment area, not because the market changed, but because the government destroyed the industrial base that generated the market. The decimation of the East Midlands coalfield was a political decision. The consequences of that decision for the communities that depended on the miners taking holidays were never calculated or compensated. Skegness today has high rates of deprivation. It has poor transport connections to the East Midlands cities that were its catchment, the railway having been cut. The absence of the railway connection to Nottingham is particularly significant. The people who might holiday in Skegness cannot easily get there. The beaching cuts of the 1960s removed the rail connections before the coalfield destruction of the 1980s removed the customers. Two government decisions made 40 years apart combined to produce the specific economic conditions of contemporary Skegness. Margate on the Kent coast is a town that is in the middle of a cultural renaissance and an economic crisis simultaneously, and the coexistence of these two conditions is the most instructive thing about the specific failure of the regeneration approach that the British government has applied to seaside towns. Turner Contemporary, the art gallery that opened in Margate in 2011, has been a genuine success. It has won awards, it has attracted significant visitor numbers, it has become one of the most visited galleries outside London. The creative community that has settled in Margate, attracted partly by the gallery and partly by the low property prices, has genuine cultural vitality. And Margate still has among the highest rates of deprivation in the southeast of England. The creative economy that the gallery catalyzed has not translated into economic improvement for the majority of Margate's residents. Property prices have risen for the creative class who have moved in. The residents who were already there have in some cases been priced out of the areas of the town that the creative renaissance has transformed, while the areas of the town that the creative renaissance has not reached remain as deprived as before. The regeneration of Margate has been real for some people and invisible for others, and the people for whom it has been invisible are largely the people who were living with the deprivation before the gallery opened. The Turner Contemporary model of cultural regeneration for seaside towns has been proposed as a model for other towns. The question of whether it is a model for improving the lives of existing residents, as opposed to a model for attracting new residents, is one that the enthusiasm for the model has not consistently engaged with. And hey, before we reach the final 6, if this video is showing you a pattern of government decision-making that built communities for a purpose and then abandoned them when that purpose changed, hit the like button and share it with someone who thinks coastal deprivation is just what happens when the market changes. Now let's continue. Rhyl opened this video. It deserves more than an opening. In its peak years, Rhyl attracted 1.5 million visitors annually. The Sun Centre, which opened in 1980, was the largest indoor water park in Britain and drew visitors from across the UK. The marine lake offered water sports. The fun fair was one of the most popular in Wales. The town's accommodation sector was substantial, and then, within a generation, almost all of this was gone. The Sun Centre closed in 2013. The fun fair was demolished. The marine lake fell into disrepair. The hotels converted to houses of multiple occupation. The specific decisions that produced this transformation included the decision not to invest in the A55 North Wales Expressway improvements that would have made Rhyl more accessible, the decision to route the Welsh Assembly's coastal tourism investment toward Llandudno rather than Rhyl, the decision to allow the marine lake and the fun fair to fall below the investment threshold without intervention, and the decision by the Welsh government to focus coastal regeneration funding on heritage-based tourism rather than on the entertainment economy that Rhyl had been built on. None of these decisions was made by anyone in Rhyl. None of them was subject to formal public consultation with Rhyl's residents. None of them has been the subject of a formal accountability process in the Welsh Assembly or the Senedd. This channel covered Whitby in the video on the most underrated places to live in the UK. That video presented Whitby as a genuinely exceptional place, and Whitby is genuinely exceptional. This entry is not a contradiction of that assessment. It is a complication of it. Whitby's specific problem is a version of the Margate problem in reverse. Instead of too little tourism, too much of the wrong kind. The Whitby that appears in the travel supplements and the TikTok videos and the Gothic festival coverage is real. The Whitby that exists for the people who live there year-round is also real, and the relationship between the two has become difficult in specific ways that government planning policy has not adequately addressed. Short-term holiday lets in Whitby have reached concentrations in certain streets that have converted what were once residential streets into streets that are effectively hotel districts without planning permissions for hotel use. The people who lived in those houses have moved elsewhere. The streets that were residential communities are now empty for most of the year and full for key weekends. The planning policy that allowed this conversion to proceed without adequate oversight was not made in Whitby. The national planning framework that made short-term lets effectively unregulatable as a change of use was a decision made in Westminster. The communities that bore the consequence were in Whitby and in similar coastal towns across Britain. The government's consultation on short-term let regulation has produced proposals. Whether those proposals will be adequate, and whether they came before or after the residential communities of certain Whitby streets had already been irreversibly converted, is a question the proposals do not answer. Hastings on the East Sussex coast is best known for the battle that was not fought there. The Battle of Hastings was fought 6 miles away, at what is now Battle. But Hastings has its own history and its own economic story, and the economic story is one that the heritage of 1066 has not significantly improved. Hastings is one of the most deprived local authorities in the southeast of England. It has significant rates of unemployment and benefit dependency. It has a housing crisis in which the combination of proximity to London, making it theoretically attractive to Londoners who can work remotely, and extreme local poverty is producing a specific and documented tension between incoming gentrification and existing poverty. The fishing community of the Stard at Hastings, one of the largest beach-launched fishing fleets in Europe, operates from the seafront with a directness and an authenticity that is genuinely unusual in a British seaside town, and that the Old Town attracts visitors to see. The fishing community and the deprivation coexist in a town where the heritage of 1066 is the primary tourist offer, and where the economic strategy for the most deprived parts of the community has not been demonstrably improved by the presence of the castle and the battlefield. The specific government decisions about transport investment, coastal regeneration, and the management of the incoming London population that has been pricing local people out of housing in the Old Town have been made above the level at which their consequences are experienced. Fleetwood, on the Lancashire coast, is a planned town. It was designed by the architect Decimus Burton and built in the 1830s by Sir Peter Hesketh Fleetwood, who gave the town his name, with the specific ambition of becoming a major port and ferry terminal connecting to Ireland and Scotland. The ambition was partially realised and then partially withdrawn. The railway that was supposed to connect Fleetwood to the national network reached the town, and then the railway network was extended north through the Lake District, bypassing the town and removing the reason for the ferry connection to work in the way it had been designed to work. Fleetwood became instead a fishing port, and the fishing industry sustained the town for over a century. The fishing industry in Fleetwood was destroyed by the Cod Wars of the 1970s, in which Britain's access to Icelandic fishing grounds was progressively restricted following Iceland's extension of its exclusive fishing zone. The Cod Wars were a diplomatic and economic negotiation in which the specific interests of the Fleetwood fishing community were subordinated to the broader diplomatic relationship with Iceland and with European partners. The fishing industry that had built Fleetwood was effectively ended by a decision made in Whitehall. No adequate replacement economic base was provided. Fleetwood today has severe deprivation. It has some of the worst health statistics of any town in Lancashire. The planned town, built with ambitious intentions in the 1830s, has been failed twice, once by the railway network that bypassed it, and once by the government that negotiated away its fishing industry. Southend-on-Sea was granted city status in 2022 in honour of the memory of Sir David Ames, the local MP who was murdered in 2021. The city status was a meaningful gesture of respect. It did not change the economic conditions of the community. Southend has the longest pier in the world, at 1.33 miles. It has a significant deprived population in the communities inland from the seafront. It has been the subject of multiple regeneration strategies over multiple decades. The specific problem of Southend, like Clacton and Margate before it on this list, is the proximity to London problem in its particular Essex form, close enough to attract day trippers and eventually commuters, not close enough to share fully in London's economic growth, and with a domestic holiday economy that was undermined by foreign package holidays decades ago without being replaced. The regeneration strategies that Southend has experienced have included retail-led regeneration, cultural-led regeneration, and residential-led regeneration. Each has produced partial improvements in specific areas and left the wider structural economic problem of the community unchanged. The city status has not yet produced a formal and funded plan for addressing the structural economic conditions of the deprived communities inland from the seafront. It has produced a mayor. The mayor has produced plans. The plans require funding. The funding has not been secured at the level the plans require. Blackpool is the city at the centre of this video's argument. It is the largest seaside resort in Britain. It has the most famous illuminations. It has the Tower. It has the Pleasure Beach, still one of the most visited paid attractions in Britain. It is also the most deprived large settlement in England, not among the most deprived. The most deprived. The Index of Multiple Deprivation for 2019 ranked Blackpool as the most deprived local authority area in England across multiple deprivation indicators. The combination of the most visited seaside resort and the most deprived large settlement in England, coexisting in the same place, is not an accident. It is the specific outcome of a model that was never designed to share the economic benefits of tourism with the year-round community. The seasonal tourism economy of Blackpool generates significant revenue. The business rates, the hospitality sector income, the visitor spending, all flow through a local economy. The people who work in the seasonal tourism sector are paid at the bottom of the wage structure. The housing that serves the tourism sector, the bed and breakfasts, the guest houses, the cheap hotels, is also the housing stock for the most deprived section of the permanent population. Blackpool has received significant government regeneration investment. It has received levelling up funding. It has a substantial program of infrastructure improvement, and it remains the most deprived local authority area in England. The question of whether the specific model of seaside tourism that Blackpool operates can produce economic outcomes for the year-round population that are meaningfully different from those it currently produces is one that the regeneration investment has not answered. And now we have reached number 1. Great Yarmouth on the Norfolk coast is the town that was specifically promised government investment, watched a significant portion of that investment go to Norwich, 30 miles away, and has been waiting for an explanation that satisfies the specific question of what was decided about Great Yarmouth, and by whom, and on what basis ever since. Great Yarmouth is one of the most deprived towns in England. It has the specific characteristics of a British seaside town that has experienced all of the pressures described in this video: the loss of the domestic holiday market, the collapse of the fishing industry in the North Sea, the closure of the canning and processing industries that depended on the fishing industry, the conversion of holiday accommodation to welfare housing, and the decline of the high street and the retail economy. Great Yarmouth was also one of the constituencies that returned the highest Leave vote in the 2016 referendum, which was read widely as a signal from deprived coastal communities about their relationship with the political establishment. The government response to that signal included multiple commitments to levelling up investment for Great Yarmouth. The outcomes of those commitments, assessed against the specific conditions of the town, have not produced the transformation the commitments promised. The offshore wind industry that has developed in the North Sea, off the Norfolk coast, has the potential to provide a significant economic base for Great Yarmouth, which is geographically positioned to be a service and supply hub for the offshore wind sector. Whether the skills, the infrastructure, and the economic benefit of the offshore wind industry in the southern North Sea will be captured by Great Yarmouth or by other, better connected communities is a question that is being answered right now, in decisions being made by the offshore wind companies, by the Norfolk County Council, and by the national government. The people of Great Yarmouth have been waiting for a decision that delivers what it promises since before many of them can remember. The offshore wind decision is the latest version of a question that this town has been asking for 2 generations. The answer is not yet in.